All right, we are ready.
Okay, hello everyone. Today we are going to be presenting about an ABA and OT collaborative approach to coping skills. My name is Andrea Nell. I'm a clinical supervisor here at MeBe. I work in the Central San Diego Kearny Mesa Learning Center, and I'll be presenting today with Shana Smith. She's an occupational therapy assistant, and she treats our kids here for OT, and she also is our OT practice support specialist. MeBe is about being me. We integrate research-based strategies with intense personal attention to provide interventions that are engaging, flexible, and customized to every child that comes through our doors. We have locations all over the country. We're in San Diego, in Kearny Mesa. We have a South San Diego Learning Center in National City, and we also have a learning center in Carlsbad, San Diego. And then we also treat the OT and ABA, or OT and speech kids come to the learning centers for their sessions. We don't treat any of those kids in home, but in all of our locations, we treat ABA kids in their homes. And then we also have learning centers in Seattle, Austin and Houston, Texas, Phoenix, Arizona, the Bay Area, and Virginia, and then learning centers to come in all of our locations as well. Please follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at mebefamily.com. We post lots of fun tips that you can use with your kids at home. And we post links to these webinars or previous webinars and blogs that we write, and lots of fun information for you guys. So please follow us on our social media accounts. And then, as I've mentioned, we provide ABA, OT, and speech therapy. So ABA, this is my field. This is where my expertise is. This is a very, Okay, this is a very general overview of what ABA is, but basically we provide individual programs and teach skills to kids ages about 2 years old into their teens. Skills that we teach are different communication skills, so how to request for things that they want, how to communicate with, teaching kids how to communicate with their caregivers and with their peers. We teach social skills and play skills. Sometimes in our sessions, we're teaching adaptive skills, so could include toilet training or learning how to wash hands or get dressed. And then we also teach some community safety skills. And our sessions take place, like I said, sometimes in the learning center or sometimes just in the home, or sometimes kids have a combination of both, where maybe they are having home sessions in the morning and they come to the learning center in the afternoon. Or for the school-aged kids, they will go to school in the morning and then they'll come to the learning center in the afternoon for socialization, or they'll have home sessions after school. That is a very quick general overview of ABA. There's a lot more involved, but that kind of gives you a little bit about what ABA is. And I'll send it off to Shana if I can move the slide. There we go.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Shana. So I work on our occupational therapy team, and similar to ABA, OT is a very big term, covers a lot of different things. At MeBe, we see kids as young as 9 months up into teenage years. It's really flexible and kind of dependent on the site too. But in general, pediatrics covers kids through those developmental windows up to age kind of like 23 as well before they switch. But our goal is to help people across the lifespan to participate in things that they want and need to do. And then we do that through therapeutic use of everyday activities. And we call those occupations. So that's where the name comes from. It's not work related. And for kids, all the things that we're working for, these are the occupations that they're engaging in. So a big occupation is being able to play, managing sleep at home, self-feeding skills, actual utensil use, the actual skills of eating, so chewing, swallowing, pieces like that, their grooming and hygiene, dressing, bathing, completing chores at home, homework, fine motor, gross motor tasks, being able to and self-regulate at home, and then participating in leisure activities, hobbies and whatnot. And then these are just kind of general terms, of course, but there's lots of other areas, little niche areas that we cover as well. within those pieces.
So today we're going to be talking to you guys about what we call coping skills, OT calls regulation. Basically, these are different words, but it's ultimately the same goal. So when your child is having a hard time and things maybe aren't going their way, they lost a game or their routine changed or just something is upsetting them, to put it really simply, we want to teach our children in ABA terms how to cope with that, or in OT terms how to regulate. So basically, this slide is just talking about how at MeBe we are kind of all working together to this with the same outcome of teaching your children how to regulate their emotions and how to cope with what they're feeling. But you might just hear different terms depending on which discipline you're talking to, whether you're talking to your occupational therapist or your behavioral therapist. And so when we're looking at it through the ABA lens, we call it coping skills. And we target coping skills before these target behaviors occur. So if you're thinking about your child having a tantrum or maybe a meltdown because they lost a game and they really wanted to win the game that they were playing with their friends, we work on teaching them how to cope with those emotions of feeling those feels of being upset when they're losing before that happens, before they're even playing the game. And then we also look at it after. So in the moment when they do lose the game, we work on teaching them how they can cope after the fact too. And then we also are at first, we're prompting these coping skills and we're kind of working through what different coping strategies each child can use. And they're maybe really prompt dependent and we're kind of helping them through that. But the ultimate goal is that they become independent with these coping skills and they're learning how to cope on their own.
So from the OT side of this, the terms that we kind of fit in here were for co-regulating and self-regulating. So our expectations and things are very similar. The shift is only slightly different where we're kind of looking, this is where we collaborate a lot of like kind of weeding out where the challenge is within this activity. So for some kids going into an activity, it might be tricky if they're already in a state of over arousal. So that's when we're looking at if they need support or they don't. So co-regulating would be when we are helping somebody regulate their body, and then self-regulating being like, I can select the tools myself. I can manage that. I can go through and get myself back to the optimal state. So we use a lot of language like I'm in the optimal state of regulation for the activity. And an activity is just a very general term for basically whatever you're trying to do. That could literally be walking from the car to school. That could be taking a bite of food, all of those different things. So we have to be in the right space to be able to manage that. We a lot of times coping skills we look at too, for us when we're looking at like responding to a kid that's high arousal, coming back down from an activity and getting into a calmer space. But we also are going to look at like maybe their bodies are too low. We have kids that are very, very mellow too, and we have to bring them up to a state of arousal while they're able to attend and participate in the activity. So it's a coping skill in that way too. Some kids fatigue easier than others. And so being able to get themselves to an optimal space. And then when we're talking about that, similar to prompted, is like we're looking at proactive strategies or reactive. So proactive in a lot of ways for us is we're trying to set our body up for success by selecting something ahead of time that gets us ready for the activity. So for kids who have a very, very busy body, we have to get there first. We have to calm our body down so that we can sit, we can participate, we can engage. Whereas with a reactive piece, we're then selecting these activities, kind of what we're talking about, like you prompt them after. I've now realized this didn't work out. I need to bring myself back down, or I need to get myself back up because I wasn't in the right space. So we're either kind of preloading with the tool, or we're going, oh, now we need to utilize a tool. So there's two different kind of big pieces that we're looking at. So when we go through this and the things we're looking at, like each kid is so individual on how they manage this. Like we said, arousal level plays a big piece. A lot of our kids are coming in a very different mood and space. And so we have to look at where their skill level is. Age is not a dependent factor for this. We have kids, their bodies might look a lot bigger than their maturity level is at. And so we can't teach them 8-year-old skills just because they're in an 8-year-old body. We have to meet them where they're at. So we're going to look at their skill levels kind of across the board. We're going to look at their language skills and how they communicate, and then kind of try to adapt that for them. Maybe they respond really well to written visuals. Maybe they respond to verbal prompts best, gestural prompts, things like that, to help them get to their strategy or to find what they need. How are they playing? Because a lot of kids respond well to using these coping skills if we can use what they like already. So some kids love music, some kids love being superheroes, and we want to make sure that we really utilize that to help them. Are they able to imitate what you're even trying to show them? So this happens a lot with like deep breathing. We have a lot of kids who physically do not know how to take a deep enough breath to calm their body down. They take shallow little breaths, which then ends up being not really productive. Do they like the space, or do they prefer physical or verbal supports? So maybe they need to change into a different area, maybe where we're trying to support them at isn't working, and the type of strategy that we're using isn't working. We use a lot of visual aids to help kids because we know a fair amount of the population that we work with really benefits from that. And when we're in a state of overstimulation, that can be really helpful to take the language component out of it and just switch to that. And then we're always looking for what works best for the kid. We can have the best ideas ever, be like, I'm going to try this with this kid, and then it just totally bombs. It doesn't work at all. So we really want to make sure we provide really custom ideas for each kid.
And then before we're thinking about which coping or self-regulation strategies we're going to use with each kid, we, kind of check off all these things and make sure they have the skills, or what we call the prerequisite skills, to be able to engage in these coping strategies. And so some of the things that we do in ABA to help with that is we do a lot of like focused practice on teaching them how to imitate, so that once they're imitating really simple actions like clapping their hands or making the car drive on the car track, then they're starting to imitate more things in their environment. Then maybe they're at the point where they can imitate that deep breath that Shana was talking about. So a lot of ABA focuses on getting them to learn all these prerequisites so that they can learn their coping and self-regulation skills.
So a big precursor to a lot of this is just really understanding how you're feeling in the first place. I don't think this is a skill that every adult has mastered. So we really have to make sure we're having realistic expectations for this front. The best part about it is when you start teaching a kid how to do this, you become so much more in tune with your own body. So we do a lot of different strategies within this. We have wherever the kid's at, we have sometimes where we're going through and trying to find out in that moment, like when we come in, how are we feeling today? We do different kinds of matching activities. We do observation activities, like where the kid can see somebody else engaging in an activity. We do all kinds of different social stories or reading through books to kind of identify what's going on in those situations. And again, this varies for sure. We model our own behaviors and emotions as well. So being able to let kids know, like, I'm hungry, my belly's feeling really grumbly, I'm feeling some pain in there's pressure in my tummy, I'm feeling really full, and all of these different kinds of things. So we're really trying to help them better understand without necessarily telling them how they're feeling. So that's a big part of it, is a lot of our kiddos need support and really figuring out what they are doing and how they are feeling. They know that they might be in like an escalated state, but they can't always match it. I have a lot of kids that often get like worried and nervous mixed up, and they're very similar, but the kind of rationale behind them is very different. So we'll use all different kinds of visuals in this piece too. So like I love all the emojis came out within like the last 5-10 years to match up, and kids have just glommed onto that idea. And some kids like a very basic one that matches up to something they can draw. So we can be either very complex, we can use human-based faces, or simple ones like this, because it kind of keeps it silly and playful too.
Yeah, and Shana's mentioned that she is sometimes labeling what her emotions are, like she's feeling hungry, her tummy is growling, and so something that we add to that with the communication piece, for at least in our ABA sessions, is we can teach children to communicate that, whether they're vocal and using their words, or if a child is using a communication device or like an iPad to communicate, we can teach them to communicate that way too. I have a client right now who is able to tell us pretty accurately how he's feeling on his AAC device. And that's because we've modeled it over time. When we can tell he's frustrated or upset because something's not going his way, we touch the angry icon on his device, and that has, like Shana mentioned, it's matching that emotion that it seems like he's feeling to what that emotion icon is on his device versus a child who's vocal and, maybe they can then say, I'm angry too. So adding that communication component to all this. So here's some more ways that we teach emotions. These are just, we talked about how important visuals can be for a lot of the kids that we work with. So this feel wheel here, it would have like a little pin and an arrow so that the child is able to, move the arrow to point to how they're feeling. So if they're not able to, maybe for them to say how they're feeling, it's hard for them, but if they can move the arrow and tell us how they're feeling that way and using this visual, that's something that we do often, kind of similar to the child who uses his communication device. Instead of him saying with his words how he's feeling, he's touching it on his iPad to tell us how he's feeling. And then this other one says, what zone am I in today? And Shana will go into more details about how they use the zones of regulation in OT. And they've taught me a lot too. When we have our collaboration meetings, we've talked about the importance of using these zones too. But basically, different emotions. I'll kind of let Shana take this one too on the next slide, but different emotions put you in different zones. And she'll talk to you about how, you might be in the green zone right now, but something might happen that might upset you. And now all of a sudden you're in the red zone. And what can we do to get back to the green zone, et cetera. And I'll let her take the lead with that here on this slide.
So these are two similar programs. The zones is what Andrea was just talking about. And then we have on the left is a modification of the alert program. It's modeled to kind of match how a kid is feeling. And so each character is kind of lining up with what we would consider like low arousal, just right arousal, and then like high arousal levels. And so the zones is similar. We expand it to add a little bit more between the yellow and red space to make it a little more broad and just more defined for kids. So the whole kind of goal behind this is sometimes it can also be really tricky to identify a specific emotion. So the purpose of the zones is to try to really recognize where your body is at. And so when we're teaching this, we're not just looking at the words, we're also teaching like the body piece into that. So how am I physically feeling? Am I tense? Am I feeling really relaxed? Are my muscles mellow? Do they feel like they need to move? Are my hands up and tense? Are my eyebrows squeezing tight? Is my heart rate beating really fast? Am I able to slow my breathing? And so sometimes we match it up in that way. And so the alert program uses that kind of like a speedometer on a car. So a car starts really slow, it gets to where it's following the speed limit. And then when we've lost control or we're moving too fast, we move into that red zone. And so we use a lot of this language ahead of time and model kind of like a baseline too, to give kids an idea like what the emotion, what the zone is that would be most beneficial to maybe what they're participating in. And so that they can start looking at and communicating to us like where they're at. So the reason that kind of matters is, on the last slide, Andrea was talking about like kids can come in and select on there how they're feeling. Sometimes it's too tricky and they come in and we're asking them to participate in something that they really are not ready emotionally for yet in that moment. And so it's a way for them to let us know like, okay, maybe I need a second. The goal with a lot of these is to first, find out how I'm feeling and then figure out if I need to do something about it to participate with my day. And so this is step one. How do I know how to communicate? What is the emotion? And then can I figure out kind of how I'm feeling? Am I in the space to be able to participate? And if I'm not, then what? So Zones really goes over a big, broad program of that. It has a lot of pieces in it. It's a pretty comprehensive piece. It uses a program as well called social thinking that's combined from like a speech program. So we use that for kids to be able to look at also the cognitive perspectives too. So it's not just, for us like that we have to use a movement-based strategy to calm down. There are like perspective taking pieces as well that OT, ABA, and speech will all kind of work on for kids of being like, I know I'm overwhelmed, but that I already had 5 turns and that person hasn't had one. I'm frustrated, but I need to like use my perspective and shift and go, they need a chance to do that too. It's not like I'm getting triggered by not being able to go, but so there's a lot of different components in the program. So we use this for some of our other older kids. Alerts used I start using zones after, I would say, like somewhere between age 5 to 7. It can be kind of complex earlier than that. And then, but whereas the alert program can be used a little bit earlier with kids when they're at those emotional levels of like 3 to 5, they can start kind of getting an idea.
So something that would be like could be a next stepping stone after our child is able to identify their emotions would be introducing social stories. And this is something that we use during our ABA sessions. And I know speech here at MeBe uses social stories a lot, and sometimes they're used in OT sessions as well. So this would be at the point where your child, maybe they're not reading all these words within the social story, but they're able to comprehend and understand what's being read to them. So they would have that prerequisite too of being able to identify their emotions. And then a social story can help them learn what they can do once they're feeling those emotions. So right here, it says, sometimes when I am frustrated or upset, so that's the emotion that they've learned to identify, I make choices that hurt other people's bodies and feelings. So they're learning like that consequence of what might happen when they're feeling that emotion. But this social story can help teach the child to make good choices and what they can do instead. And that's something we like to focus on a lot in ABA. So you're feeling this emotion, maybe you're reacting in a way that isn't positive. So maybe you're hitting or crying or something that's maybe just not socially appropriate. And so instead, or this example in number 3, page 3, instead of yelling, I can use my words and say, I'm frustrated right now. Or instead of hiding or running away, I can use my fingers to count to 10. And so those are just, and these can be personalized too to each child. So whatever emotion your child is feeling, that can be added. And then whatever reaction they usually have when they feel that emotion, we can say how maybe that's not the best thing to do, but we can give them a replacement behavior of what they can do instead of having that reaction when they feel that emotion. So social stories are definitely a good strategy to use and something that really can be personalized to each child. So this is another program that we do during our ABA sessions, and Shana, something that they can work on during OT as well. So basically teaching children to sort what behaviors that are expected and things that they should be doing versus unexpected. So an example of something in this list above that's expected would be kind, right? That's something that we want our kids to do. A behavior that might be unexpected would be, let's see, cry when you have to do something that you don't want to do. So that's something that's unexpected, but instead of doing that, we can find something in this list that is expected. So maybe asking for a break or engaging in one of their coping strategies, and coming up, we'll have a whole list of examples of different coping skills that these kids can do when they are feeling emotions and having to do something that they don't want to do. And instead of crying, they can engage in one of the coping skills instead. Shana, do you have anything else to add for how you guys teach expected versus unexpected during your sessions?
Yeah, so there's a combination of like both a behavioral perspective and then also, those learning pieces of social norms that come into play, in addition to like when so I always look at when I tell kids, like, we work on expected and unexpected, it's not like you're good or bad. This isn't you did something wrong, you did something right. It's more so for this circumstance, like this is what other people are going to maybe be looking to try to complete. It's the average of what everybody's going to be kind of looking at, obviously. And I always tell kids, I'm like, if this is hard, then we need to figure out what to do. So like if I am like putting my head down during a math lesson, maybe I'm tired, maybe I'm bored, that's unexpected. It's not because I think, like, the reality is it's not because you're being a bad kid. It's the thing is my body might not be able to be there at that time. The expectation is to participate and be awake in that moment. If I can't, then we need to do something about it. So this is a big thing of, within these things, like raising your hand to be called on. That's an expected piece. Pushing people over when they're trying to answer would be unexpected. Like, we know it's obviously aggressive, one thing, but like, it also doesn't accomplish the same things at that point. It's just going to take away from the teacher because they're going to have to be redirecting that level of aggression. So we really want to look at like why unexpected's coming up, and then give them the other options. If they can't figure it out on their own, then that's when we kind of step in, because we know for a lot of the kids we work with in our population, this is something that's taught. A lot of the skills are taught along the way. It's tricky for them to kind of get it by osmosis. So it's very general, cut and dry. Like I call it, like we have to teach the skills that seem obvious to them circumstance by circumstance. And so we are waiting. We are doing this type of things. And so they have a clear-cut picture of what life is kind of supposed to look like to be successful. But with, there's obviously give and take with all that.
Yeah, awesome.
One of the pieces of the zones encompass, so this kind of mirrors that. This is looking at like times it is expected to be there, because for us, like when we teach the zones program, it isn't a behavioral program in any way, but you can't, take behavior out of life in any way. So when we're, like we talked about, like being in the blue zone, what if my energy level is low and my energy is low and I'm at school, that's not the ideal time for that. But it is really great to be in the blue zone if I'm sitting and maybe watching a movie or I'm reading a book. I could be like calm, mellow, or if I'm getting ready for bed, then that's the best time to be in the blue zone because it's helpful. If I was in the red zone, I'm out of control. That's not a great time before bed. I'm trying to get into my rest cycle. It's not ideal. So we'll go through times for kids and match this. And this is something they can fill in, or we can put pictures for them of times that they are actually in these moments. So I've done all of those things, like taking a picture of a kid, playing sports with a friend, and that's them, in the green or yellow zone. And, like on the playground, I always tell kids, like on the playground, you don't really want to be in blue and red. You can, obviously that I don't not have that, but if you're trying to participate with friends, you kind of want to have your energy level up. You want to be moving kind of quick. You want to be able to be excited and having a good time. So sometimes even the green zone's not ideal for the playground. You want to be like a little bit elevated to be able to have a good time. So this is a piece, that again, it really draws on like the positive side of that, of like what we're really trying to get kids to look at, like, this is what's going to help me in my day.
Yeah, and this is a strategy that we can incorporate into our ABA sessions and make it behavioral. So how can we make this a communication goal for the child? So just teaching them to label it, like I said in the slide earlier, it's basically the same things. We're just using different words. So we're teaching them to communicate which zone they're in and to label which zone they're in and to see in this location and in this moment. So at school, at recess, I should be in the blue zone, I think, or what's the happy zone? I don't know.
The green zone.
The green zone. There you go.
Yep.
But when this happens at recess and doesn't go my way, then I'm in the red zone, and then teaching them to label how can they get back to the green zone. So we try our best, and I work with Shana and other OTs here at MeBe to like, this is a strategy that's working for them in OT. So how can we incorporate it and make it part of their ABA goals too?
So these are just some different strategies that pop up. There's tons for every single kid. Some of these come from zones. Some of these just come from different activities that we participate in. So I mean, when people are talking about coping skills in general, I feel like it's when a kid is, typically escalated in general. But, like we are looking at both sides. Like we said, kids can be what we consider kind of like that blue zone space. They're very tired, sleepy, just low arousal level too. So some of these things are going to be adjusting for both pieces. So one of the big areas that we look at is really getting kids to participate in functional breathing, because so many of them, like we talked about, are taking shallow breaths, which just don't help your body calm down. A really effective way to calm your body down is slowing your breath down and being conscious and mindful and aware of that. In addition to it, physiologically calms your body down too. So we like to pair this sometimes with an activity and a movement too, which is where the two visuals on the left come from. Kids actually, these are like full-size sheets, or we've blown them up where they're on whole posters and things like that, where kids can match it. So for kids that have a hard time really physically watching, it helps for them to be able to have something to hold on to. So like when we're in the space of like breathing in, there's a designated amount of time that they have to move across that, hold their breath in, and then hold it out. So I have so many kids that move really quickly, and I'll move on to the 6 sides of breathing. Some kids do really well with the lazy 8 breathing because they like the pattern. It's really fun, especially the bigger you make it. They can use their whole body to engage, and then that kind of shifts their attention away from where they were at. So pairing calming strategies with a movement can be really helpful. On the bottom, there's a little tiny pyramid. It's like a matching activity similar to what we were looking at with that expected and unexpected. So this is where that perspective taking comes into play too. Um, how significant is this? So we teach kids, what is a small problem, a medium problem, a big problem, because what can be so triggering is if, they think that the world is ending, but really all it was my car, I can't find it in this moment. That might feel like a really big problem for them. So we start going through those pieces and identifying like what would be considered different things. So like a big problem is if somebody hits you, like that is a time you need to go get help with something. Whereas like if you got an answer wrong in class, like you're going to be in class for your entire childhood for the most part. You're going to have a lot of opportunities to get your answers wrong. So it's a small problem in the bigger scheme of things. It doesn't mean it's not easy or that it's easy to tolerate. It can still feel yucky, but the more we realize some of those pieces, that it isn't as big of a deal as we think, and that other people have that happen, we can expand on these scenarios, of course, to go through. It really helps kids. So some of these come from like PECs too, like Andrea was saying, these come from AAC devices. They come from like a PEC program, like visual icons so that kids can select them and pick like what they like. I know a lot of kids love different kinds of pressure, but a lot of times when they're upset, like they love tickles. That's the thing that they like to do. So if they choose that, a wall push-up would be something like I either need to wake up or I need to like burn off some steam. I need to get my body to settle back down because I've got all this excess energy, which might look like frustration or anger, and I need to redirect it physically into something else. Taking a walk, different pieces. And then bubble breathing is for some of our kids that maybe the 6 sides of breathing doesn't work, lazy 8 breathing doesn't work. We need something very tangible that's fun to engage in. It doesn't always work if a kid can't blow bubbles. So that's a whole other oral motor conversation. But I had a kid earlier today, bubbles weren't the interest. We used straws and we were blowing pom-poms and shooting them into a goal. And they wanted to move the cup all the way across the table. So they had to take a full enough breath to be able to do it. And that was like the first time I really saw them get that whole big belly breath, which was a huge win because it just doesn't work well otherwise. It wasn't mindful enough. It's like, check, I took my breaths, Shana, I'm done with them. So we try to find whatever creative way we can to slow kids down. I think the next one's yours.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So these are some examples of menu choice boards of coping skills that I've used with some of the kids that I work with. I think the most important thing for me, at least, is that the child is choosing which coping skill they want to do. Yes, we are teaching them initially like how to do these things, but then we want to give them a menu of choices and we want them to choose and do whatever works best for them to help calm them down. So this A to Z coping skills one has a lot of good options of what kids can do when they're feeling frustrated and as a replacement. And what we do during our ABA sessions is when the child is de-escalated and are not quite feeling upset for whatever might be happening in their environment, we practice these during session. And so this would be important for them to have those imitation skills so that we can practice them, model for them how to do it, and then they can copy and do the actions with us. And then we have this visual out during our ABA sessions. And if something is about to happen, like the example, I'll just stick with the same example that I gave earlier. So if the child is playing a board game and we can tell they're probably about to lose the game, we would have this visual ready for them so that they can, and maybe we know kind of what their favorite one is because they always do it and it helps them through. So we might like gesture to the letter F, find a safe place, so that that can like remind them that that's what they can do when the game is over and it didn't end how they wanted it to end. This other one on the right with the mad and sad emoji, and it says, when I'm feeling mad or sad, I can. And they mean nothing to you guys. And when I first showed them to the child that uses it, it meant nothing to him, but it was something that we practiced during our sessions, and it started as a play skill. So that's something we work on during ABA, is just kind of pretend play and role playing these different things. So his favorite one is shake his sillies out. So he just kind of, shakes his body like this. And that's basically that was the one that he chose, because we went through all of them and practiced the different examples of what they were. But that's the one he gravitated towards and did the most. So when something that isn't going to go his way, he's about to lose that game, we might point to shake his sillies out, and then he can shake his sillies out and kind of, take his mind off of, redirect him from, okay, the game didn't end how I wanted it to, but it's okay. I'm shaking my sillies out and I'm doing something fun, and this is calming me down. So it's really important for the children to be able to choose kind of which strategies they want, and little menu visual choice boards like this are a good way to show the kids all the different options of what they can do. And then this next one is another one that, we talked about how important it is to personalize programming and sessions for each child. So this child really likes Hulk and Spider-Man. So when I'm feeling mad, like the Hulk, I can say, I feel mad or I feel sad. I take a deep breath, take a break, count to 5, play with something else. So this was a choice board, and we would kind of just carry it with us throughout session. And this helped remind him of what he can do as a coping strategy for, back to the same example, when he didn't win the game, or he used this one a lot at recess when kids were getting too close to him. He needed his personal space. And so, oh, it looks like you're feeling mad like the Hulk. What can we do instead? And, oftentimes he just needed a break. So he would sit on the side and watch the kids play at recess for a little bit. And we would talk about, oh, I'm mad like the Hulk. And I feel sad that I'm not playing, but it's okay. I'm taking a break, going to count to 5, and then I'm going to go back and play with my friends at recess. And so this is a good example of just kind of personalizing these coping skills to be individual to each child.
And so before I dive into all these ones, these are some take homes we wanted you guys to have. In terms of what this looks like for application for us as well within sessions, is really getting kids to know their bodies. And it, if they have the language, the verbal language to tell us, or the AAC device, then great. But if not, we're doing a lot of observations of just how they respond to some of these things. So that's where that co-regulation and self-regulation comes in. When we have a point that kids are able to select these, they're kind of on the border of co-regulating and self-regulating. They need some prompted assistance, but they're able to go, that works for me. I've practiced that and now I'm utilizing it. So I do all sorts of things in sessions with kids to just help them understand what each of these spaces even feel like, and then observing what other kids' space they might be in while they're in those moments and playing. So I have kids who really didn't know what calm felt like because they're so high arousal all the time. They might feel very anxious. They might feel very stressed. So something like participating in very mindful activities that are super structured help bring them down to a space that they're calm enough to be able to then go and participate. So I'll talk to kids a lot about this of I had a feeding session earlier this week, and the kiddo, I could see he was starting to just get really stressed. You can see it on his body. He's tensing, his cadence of his voice was changing. And so I looked at him and I was like, I think this is a great time for a break. I was like, let's look at some of these options. And after, we ended up doing some rowing. We just stood up and rowed back and forth. And that was really silly for him. He thought it was really fun. It was nice, deep pressure. It was very rhythmical. My body was nice and calm and welcoming, and noticing how he was feeling in those moments. I was acknowledging how he felt and recognizing what he needed. And that's sometimes a lot for kids in itself. It's just that we see you, we hear you, we know this is hard. Kids need to be acknowledged so much how they're actually just feeling in a moment, and that it's not easy for them. And so when we went back, what a lot of times we do is even just reflective thinking too. So We were really starting to move into the yellow zone before then. And that strategy was so much fun. I feel like I've kind of moved back down to the green zone. Do you feel like you're still in still in that yellow red space, or has your body started to slow down a little bit? Where are you at? Should we keep going with that strategy, or are we ready to return to the activity? So I will, do that in the moment with kids. Same thing as like I've done yoga where we go through a whole like flow of yoga with a kid and then lay down on the ground and like, this is what it feels like. Like, do you feel like you need to pop up and run, or are you okay to lay here for 2 minutes? And like, I feel really good. Some kids don't recognize what that baseline feeling of calm is because they're just always going all over the place. So it's hard to teach, when it's time to calm down unless we know what calm really feels like. Or like what might be a great time to be calm. When is it really helpful to be calm in our bodies? And in the same space, again, like we might have kids that come in who have already been fatigued, and it's like, I really want to go play at recess with those kids, but I'm exhausted. Like, what can I do? Maybe I need to take breaks every 5 minutes and sit on the side, and I need somebody to model that for me. Maybe it needs to just be okay. And maybe I can invite a friend. I'm tired. Can you come sit with me because I don't want to be left out? So that advocacy skill that falls into that as well. There's so much of this that's like a self-advocacy that kids, I think a big part of it for us is kids can ask for their needs to be met. We help them figure out what they kind of need that works best for them. And then it's respected and it's provided. Kids a lot of times do tell you what they need, but we're still learning, or maybe we're so caught up in what we're doing that it's hard to come back down to their level. We're overstimulated ourselves. We're stressed as well. So when we're teaching this, like I always encourage parents to be part of this program, because then they have the vocabulary to communicate how they're feeling. They have the ability to look at their own feelings and go like, I don't have it. I don't have it right now to sit here and do this, or I need to be the calm in the storm to be able to help and support you. You kind of have to be regulated to help somebody else regulate. Otherwise, it kind of, explodes somewhere else. Or an adult will pick a maladaptive coping skill later down the line. That's when we get some of these very unhealthy behaviors as adults, is we're having too hard of a time. So this is when, a lot of times just getting adults and helping them too. So maybe is a big, we're helping families with, a lot of the same strategies. Sometimes we have to even refer out so that parents can get the support they need, because this is, as much as I'd like to say, like we can teach every single part of it, it's a whole team effort. Everybody's involved, and our time in the clinic has to be mirrored back out at home. We get lots of very structured opportunities here to practice it, but until it gets applied across all different environments, it really doesn't become a full day of success for kids or families. So, in terms of stuff we wanted you to have for home, some of the things that you can kind of go through strategy wise is first check in verbally or observing like where the kid is at. Like when you're asking them to do something, see where they're at first. Like recognize like what cards have you been dealt in this moment? What are you working with? Because you might have a kid that is way too amped to be able to follow of like 4-step instruction. So many times we're like, go get this, that, and that, and that. Why don't you have your shoes on? They're not there. They're not there yet. They need to come back down, sit maybe with you for a second. Another one is like priming kids, letting them know what is actually expected. When we go into the store, and you're going to see so many fun things that you love. I know you love to get a new thing. Today, we're not getting anything. So you can help me pick the things from the list, but we aren't grabbing anything that's not on the list today. I'll remind you if you get stuck, but we're only getting groceries today at the store. Letting them know. Or when we walk across the street, if I can see you can stay next to me, you can walk without holding my hand. If you start to run, we're going to have to hold hands to walk across the street, so that they know there's kind of that consequence as well, but also, well, you told me what to do. A lot of times kids are like so caught off guard that we're like, where'd this rule come from? We never even gave them the rule in the first place, and we're expecting them to meet it. Often kids just don't pick it up. Adjusting the level of difficulty. So like, why aren't your shoes on? Maybe at that time the socks were tighter than normal, or their feet are sticky because they were just playing. And it's like, that's just too hard. I'm frustrated. Let's go over there and adjust it. I got the socks over your toes. Now you get them up over your heels. We've got 50% of the battle handled in that moment. Modeling healthy strategies for kids. So I need to take some breaths right now. This is mommy's lost. I can't figure out where we're going. I don't know which building we're going into. I took a wrong turn. I'm going to pull over and take my breath for a second. It's not safe for me to drive when I'm worked up like this. It's not safe. And kids are always watching what we're doing. So, if we can model healthy options, they're going to have so much more in their toolbox to be able to pull from. Offering strategies from like 1 to 3 choices. So if kids, like we've shown you so many great things, that's a kid who has really worked on that. That is not something kids can do from the very beginning. It's way too hard to pick from 6 choices. So that's a built up exercise until we get there. Usually kids have like 2 choices max. Sometimes they can pull from 3. So it's not like, do you want to go to the movies? Do you want to go here? Do you want to go? Okay, we're moving too fast. Should we step outside, or do you want to give me a big hug and take some breaths? That's all we've got. They're not going to hear much else. Consider decreasing the amount of demand that you're putting on a kiddo. So kind of similar to decreasing the challenge of the activity, but also like, could you do this? Could you walk into a grocery store that's noisy that you've never been to and then grab a box that's on the bottom shelf that's on they might not be able to do that if they're already new to that space and curious even. I want to look at everything. And you're like, I'm too excited to help you. Modifying the environment. We do that a lot in a lot of different spaces. We have spaces throughout our clinic, quiet rooms for kids, individual spaces where kids go throughout the day for both ABA and OT. I recommend this for families at home, is like having a quiet room. So quiet room for them that isn't a punishment space by any means. It's a space to decompress, or it's a little tent, or it's behind the couch, or it's underneath a big weighted blanket, or whatever they need to feel safe and to take away all of the stimuli in the environment. Noise is very aggressive. It is very taxing on the body. Loud spaces, a lot of people in a space, like trying to figure out, I'm walking through things. Those kinds of things can be really hard. So just removing kids from that can help them calm down. Like when you're like, we need to leave the store for a second to calm down. It's not to punish, it's to like calm down. And then we're going to go back in when we're in a good space. Maybe you can't, maybe you can. Providing enough time, I will say, is a huge one. This happens to even us. It happens to me, like it's usually when I get like a new kid, I don't know how long it's going to take them to do something. I did not set up the activity to make them successful. And I tell them that I'm like, I feel like I should have given you more time so you had a chance with this, because now we're both late to bring you out to your parent and you're rushing, I'm stressed, you're stressed, and we're both like trying to figure it out. So in the morning, it's not the time to practice dressing always for kids. It's not the time to figure out everything. Practice that when they're home or on the weekends when they don't have to be to school and you have to be to work. I'll let you finish these ones, Andrea, because these are definitely, you've got so much skill in this. The last one. And then I know you have some more information to share too.
Yes. So the next one is creating visuals. So we're big on visuals. I think kids of all different skill levels and abilities benefit from visuals. And Shana mentioned how some of the visuals that I showed earlier were like huge menus with all these different options. And like she said, that's kind of like the end point for some of the kids where they've already learned a lot of different strategies and they've learned which one's best for them. But you can just use whatever 1 or 2 that your first, sorry, there's a bug that just flew through my face. Whatever 1 or 2 strategies you're initially teaching your child, have that be the visual, and have that in all of their environments. So send it to school with them in their backpack, talk to the teacher, put it on their desk at school, have it in every room of the house, have it in the car. If they're going to grandma and grandpa's house for the weekend, make sure they have a copy, just so that those visuals really do help kind of remind them of what they can do and which coping strategies they can use. And then the last one is make it fun. So this is a huge focus for us during our ABA sessions, is we just want these strategies to be fun. I have to admit that I have tried to introduce coping strategies to kids and it just becomes a demand. And it's like, that's not the point. You are supposed to be calming yourself down and getting back to baseline where you're ready to work and ready to play with your friends and all that. So if it's not fun, then it's not working, and there's probably something else that's going to work instead. So going back to the drawing board and seeing which strategy might be a better option for your kid. And a lot of what we do is practicing these things before they're escalated or before they're feeling frustrated or upset. And so making sure that they're having fun when they're practicing it is really important, so that when they are feeling upset or whatever, they're able to use those strategies and help calm themselves down and bring them back to where they need to be to get through the rest of their day. And that's all I have. Does anyone have any questions for us?
And just as a reminder for everybody, you can type your questions into the question box or into the chat box. On the side, everybody is muted, so we can't hear you. So just go ahead and type your questions in. I do have to say, every time we talk, I feel like I learned something new. So I always appreciate the advice that you give. I have kids at home myself, and I'm like, I always have to remind myself, we're not perfect, but we can keep trying and using these skills, right?
Yeah, and I think I really like that Shana touched on how it's like a family approach, a team approach. Everyone can benefit from these. It's not just the kids that we're working with. Like, I use coping skills myself, as everyone kind of has to be on the same page, and we all have to be. We can't expect our kids to do these skills if we can't even find ways to cope ourselves. So team approach is definitely important for everyone.
Yeah. And then not rushing in the mornings too. That's a good tip.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
I'm so triggered in the morning by that. But I mean, I look at it like, when you're driving, how many people do you know that are just like very aggressive drivers? And that's when you are not using functional coping skills. If somebody cuts you off and you end up trying to like get in front of them and veer them off the road, like, your coping skills need work too. And so these kids, like, when they get mad that somebody cuts them or grabs their toy, like, it's the same idea. So when we're expecting them to do that, like, they need to be modeled those skills along the way. And really, they're just learning these things. It's a reminder for like all of us. So much of when this is happening is they're literally gaining the skills step by step by step that they're going to use when they're our age. They don't have them yet. So when you're teaching them, the key word is they are being taught. They are not intuitive and they're not obvious all the time. So, give kids credit. I fall by the example of like 99% of the time, if they could, they would. If they could do it on their own, they would, because kids love to be independent a lot of the time. They love to be like, I took my breaths up by myself. And you're like, that's right, you did. You're amazing.
Car seat straps all by myself.
I know we had a kid today. Somebody was yelling and next to us, and it was like they asked one of the other therapists, "Can I have headphones?" And it was like that was the first time we'd ever seen that was their coping skill of managing in a busy environment when it's unpredictable. And they had practiced. I don't know. They'd been practicing for a long time, and it was like such a proud moment. Everybody looked and were like, "Bravo to you, little girl. We're so proud." I love those moments.
And I will make a plug too. I know that you mentioned a couple of times the AAC devices.
Mhm.
We are doing a webinar next month in November on the basics of AAC as well. And so that may be something that would be of interest. I know you mentioned that as some examples. And so I wanted to put that out there. We did get one question about how to make some of the visuals or social stories. Another question.
So if you have an ABA or OT or speech provider, they can help you create these visuals. To be honest, the ones that I've made personalized for the kids that I work with, I do an image search and a Word document, and I put it together that way. But there's a lot of stuff out there on the internet too. Quick, internet search can get you lots of things, but we have a lot of resources here at MeBe that we can offer to our families too. For social stories Katie, maybe this is something you can send in the follow-up email because I don't know it off the top of my head, but there's that social story app creator too that is beneficial, where families can make their own social stories to help with coping skills too.
Yep, and we actually have done a webinar on creating visual supports, and that some of those tips are provided there too. So definitely, if you haven't yet, check us out at MeBe Family on YouTube, because like I mentioned, we do these webinars every month, and we've been doing them for over a year. So we've got a lot of really good content out there available, and it's all for free. We just want to provide those resources to families. Let's see. Wait one more minute. I think we're about at time. I see there's a question looks maybe about speech.
Yeah, I saw that. I think we need some clarification. Maybe I saw we were asking like how much speech someone's getting, but
Okay.
maybe you can, I wasn't sure if that was applying to like a specific client, or because we don't obviously discuss that part, but in terms of services, like what we offer in the center or through MeBe, or how long they've been in services, those kinds of things. If you're able to clarify on that, we can give you a little more information.
And I will say too, I'll send a follow-up email to everybody who registered that includes the link to the recording as well as additional resources that were mentioned. And if you are interested in services with MeBe, just give us a call so we can connect with our team and we can talk through the insurance and any other questions that you may have too about starting services.
And we have different pieces too, like for our parents that are considering OT, like some call and just to check and make sure that's the service they're looking for. If it's ABA, things like that, like that's what our team does. So if kids are not receiving services already, I do that as well. Like I speak with families if they're not sure like which discipline, if like we're the ones that are going to address that or not. We kind of help filter out some of that stuff.
All right, perfect. Well, I think we're about at time for our evening presentation. Thank you again so much, everybody who joined us this evening. Maybe we'll see you next month for the webinar, and feel free to contact us with any other questions. Thanks again for spending your time with us.
Thank you.
Thanks.